Hi, I'm Sarah Bramwell, the editor of InsuranceInvestor.com, and I'm here with Sindhu Krishna, Head of Sustainable Investments Office at Phoenix Group. Sindhu is speaking at our ESG Investors Forum later this year, and ahead of that, we wanted to catch up with her just to get a little bit of a flavour of what she's going to be talking about. Hi, Sindhu, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Sarah.
So we're going to be talking about kind of the net zero investment journey of an asset owner. So to kick us off, can you tell me a little bit about some of your net zero targets?
Absolutely, sure. Firstly, delighted to be participating in the event itself, looking forward to it. So Phoenix Group absolutely has a net zero target, but we also appreciate that net zero is not one giant leap to some point in the future. We need to get there in steps. So we have interim milestones, which we announced in 2021. So our interim targets are set for 2025 and 2030 as well. So for 2025, we want to be reducing the emission intensity of our portfolio by about 25%, and that's for the listed assets, listed equity and credit. And we want to reduce the emission intensity of our portfolio by at least half the emissions basically by 2030 across all assets that Phoenix Groups is able to controls or influences the investment strategy.
Lovely. And then I'm always interested in the kind of how you get to these things. So, how did you set these targets? Or how did you come up with them? Who was involved? What was the process behind setting them?
Sure. I think one of the things Phoenix is committed to is to be science-based. We want to bring real world change. We want to be part of that. And we completely appreciate that we are playing our part. And everybody has to do so, whether it's policymakers, corporates, and us as individuals. All of us have to do our bit. So in our endeavor to be science-based, we looked at leading think tanks, the International Energy Agency, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. We looked at the 1.5 degree pathways. So we looked at the possible ways we can get to net zero and looked at the targets, the interim targets that we need. And now it led to the setting of those targets that I just mentioned to you. We also had a consultancy whom we partnered with to help us on the journey. So there was loads of stakeholders internally, some support that we took from a consultant. But again, the main thing was looking at science-based guidance to help us with those targets.
Lovely. And obviously, 2025 is still somewhere away and 2030 even further. But, how far on that journey have you come? Have you made any changes so far? And if so, are there any lessons that you've learned that you might be able to share along the way of your journey?
Absolutely, Sarah. So I think as we've announced, the first area we're looking at listed equity and credit. One of the good things in that space for listed assets is more data points. So there's already frameworks. So hence we are approaching that asset class in the first instance. We've been working very closely with our asset management partners in terms of what does a decarbonization strategy look like. What does this mean for our portfolios, investment portfolios? How do we tilt? What's the basis of tilting? So we've been doing all of those testing. We did some work even before we announced. We're carrying that forward in much more granularity as I speak to you now, and we're looking forward to bringing those change not too distant future for our investment portfolios for those asset classes. On your point, in terms of lessons learned in journey, I think the key thing here, from my point of view, for asset owners or everybody investors, is perfection should not come in the way of good. This is an evolving landscape, whether it's data, it's standards, how you even calculate the carbon intensity. And the same in carbon intensity of the portfolio will result in different numbers depending on the vendors you choose. So I think there's different managers approaching it differently. The data sets is different, standards are moving. So there is a number of challenges as you get into the weeds of things in terms of implementing. But again, progress is important because where we are coming from is as a financial risk from climate change, and we need to react. We need to make our portfolios resilient and not also capture an opportunity. So we have to make progress. But again, this is in a world which is constantly evolving and improving.
I completely agree. And, given that context and the fact that the world is evolving and that this is a process and a journey in many ways, how can you make sure that you stay on track with your goals, and have you put anything into the process to kind of monitor and manage and make sure that you are kind of taking the steps along the journey?
Great question. Absolutely, Sarah, because that's part of the process that we want to weave this into the fabric of organization in terms of how we approach the broader ESG consideration, but also more specifically on climate. So we have in public domain in our climate report the governance structure that we have, which will monitor progress, pause, make sure we're on track. If you're not, what do we do, etc. So we have got processes in place to pause and review, reflect, and move on. It is a standard, sustainability is a standard agenda item in our governance forums, at management level as well as the more senior board level. So we've constantly have this topic being considered in all of our discussions internally and governance forums as well. So absolutely, so that we have frameworks in place to check our progress against our objectives.
Great, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear more about this from you and other delegates at our conference later in the year.
I look forward to it, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks. I've got to try and remember what I said now. Great, thank you. And I'm always sort of really interested in the backstory and the operational side of kind of these targets and things. And I'd be interested to know, how did you set the targets? Who was involved? How were those decisions made? And what's that kind of process like?
Absolutely, Sarah. I think at Phoenix, we want to be science-based. We want to be part of the real world change. We just don't want the portfolios to decarbonize with no impact on the real world. We want to use engagement as a voice. So I think the key focus is the real world change for us. So against that backdrop, we looked at science-based reference point. We looked at think tanks like the International Energy Agency, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. So we looked at those bodies and the pathways, the trajectories coming from them in terms of what is needed to be on track for 1.5 degrees. We also had an external consultant who supported us on the journey. So there was a wide range of internal stakeholders, an external consultant, and again, guidance, which is science-based, which helped us in terms of setting our interim targets, which I just set out before.